Welcome to Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com, YouTube, as well as the mobile app. He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants. Multiple ways you'd interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You can also hit us up on social media, hashtag Giants Chat. He is at GiantsWFAN on Twitter. I'm at Lance Medow, one word, last name, Medow. As we are broadcasting from the Giants podcast studio, it is presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. So glad you could join us. I know there was no show yesterday because of the snow that hit the New York, New Jersey metropolitan area.
By the way, I'm glad you didn't get buried in the snow because that was pretty tall.
You know, you tried the zinger here early on. Yeah, well, you know what? I've got quick hands, believe it or not, Paul, so you shouldn't overlook that, okay, as we continue to have the puns roll off our tongue here in the early stages of Tuesday's program. Yes, growing up in New York, I've had my fair share of reps in terms of navigating when rain turns to snow. You'd be very pleased and happy to hear that.
Excellent.
So, yes, I was here in one piece. I made the big trek from New York to New Jersey. I'm safe and sound, and you're going to have to deal with me for the next 60 minutes.
All good.
Isn't that lovely?
It's all good.
Indeed. And we got a lot to tackle. We'll get into really the NFL coaching carousel over the course of this program because a lot of what's happening around the league could very well impact what John Harbaugh is trying to put together here with the Giants. So I think there's some tie-ins there, and more than happy to delve into whatever else you want to discuss as we get to some phone calls as well as your YouTube comments and your tweets. So let's start on the coaching carousel because literally minutes before, Paul, this show started, it's coming in fast and furious. So the Buffalo Bills have officially announced that they're promoting Joe Brady, their offensive coordinator, to the head coaching position, which is not a surprising development. Brady was one of the candidates that happened to be favored, at least in terms of the percentage points that were being thrown out there. I guess the one thing that I'm a little bit surprised about is connected to that, Adam Schefter is reporting that if Brian Daboll, former Giants head man, doesn't get the Raiders job, which he just interviewed with for a second time, he is in all likelihood going to be named the Titans head offensive coordinator and joined forces with Robert Saleh, as the both of them obviously got to know one another when they were here in the New Jersey area. But, you know, Daboll was rumored, and he did interview for the Bills job, and I thought even if he didn't get the head coaching job, maybe there was a chance because of his tie-ins to Josh Allen that maybe he would return there as the OC.
I could see the connection, Lance, no doubt. But, ultimately, maybe the Bills just decided that they didn't want to do one of those you can go home again situations and just felt that it was better off if they went with a clean sweep and just decided to go with somebody totally fresh and new. But, hey, you know what? I'm glad that Brian Daboll's going to land on his feet one way or another. He's going to be in the league this year, and that's a good thing. He's a good football man. He's a good guy. And, I wish him all the best wherever it is that he winds up landing, whether it be the Raiders or with the Titans. I do know, and you are right, by the way, that was not just a quick, brush-by comment by Lance. Robert Saleh and Brian Daboll got along very well.
Yeah.
They had a very cooperative relationship when the Giants and Jets had their dual practices. They have mutual respect for each other. One guy's a defensive guru, another guy's an offensive guru. So there's a fit there. And I'm not really surprised that Saleh would want to have him on the staff.
Well, to your point, he brings in somebody with head coaching experience. Not to say that Saleh's a micromanager, but I think it's nice to know the other side of operations for your team can be at least guided and headed by an individual that has been there and done that before. But what you were really hitting on, and I wholeheartedly agree with you, Paul, Daboll has an excellent track record with developing quarterbacks. And if he doesn't get the Raiders job, well, who's in Tennessee? Cam Ward, who's going to be entering his second year. I think if you're Cam Ward, you've got to be so pleased that there's a chance you could be working with somebody that helped develop Josh Allen and was here with, Daniel Jones and Jackson Dart briefly. So there's a lot of attractiveness on his resume from a play caller, development quarterback perspective.
I will throw a little addition onto this. And before you call me crazy, think about it.
I don't need to even wait to do that, but go ahead, yes.
Think about it for 2 or 3 seconds. I think the Titans OC job is more attractive than the Raiders head coaching job.
I don't think that's crazy at all. Yeah.
Okay, the way the Raiders go through head coaches, we've seen how they churn them out, like a food processor.
Pete Carroll lasted only 1 year there.
And
of all guys.
Quite frankly, that roster is a mess. Geno Smith is coming off one of those original Geno Smith incarnation type years where he seems to have taken a massive step back from his days in Seattle. And, I don't know that it's going to get any better, no matter who the next head coach is going to be. So you could make a really good case that the Titans are in a much better shape to succeed than the Raiders are. Now, it's a lesser job, which is lesser money, lesser prestige. I get all of that. But how about quality of life? You could be in worse places than Tennessee, and with a team that should be on the way up.
And in a division that's not necessarily overwhelming. There's been a lot of turnover there. Look at what the Jaguars did this past season. Texans did regroup, but it's not necessarily a juggernaut that exists there. There's a pathway to perhaps compete and win the division.
Broncos, Chargers, Chiefs. You think any of those three teams are really going to fall off the face of the earth? No, the Chiefs will be back. I mean, it may take them a little bit, but they will be back. And the Chargers are good. And quite frankly, so are the Broncos, if you haven't noticed.
Well, and also from Dable's perspective, and this is what you were hitting on, you do wonders with Cam Ward. That offense takes off. All of a sudden, the next cycle, you're going to probably get interest for other head coaching jobs. So it's not as if he'd be burying himself. I mean, case in point, look at Robert Saleh. Saleh's actually the best example. He had a rough patch with the Jets. He goes back to San Francisco, gets his old defensive coordinator job back. He did a heck of a job with an injury-plagued unit, right? And all of a sudden gets interviews and lands in Tennessee. So I think Dable, he's not naive. He's been through the NFL cycle plenty of times.
Sure.
I'm sure he understands that. And sometimes a year, I don't want to say a year off, but a year maybe taking a non-head coaching job could get you back on track faster and with a little bit more stability or promise than, to your point, if you take a job that has had so much of a merry-go-round and you don't know who the quarterback's going to be. You're not necessarily sure about the defensive side of the ball. A lot of coordinators have been taken off the board because they are now heading elsewhere. So there's a lot to think about. I'm sure, though, given that these jobs are far and few, if you're Brian Dable, you may not want to take a chance that another job is going to open up.
I know.
And out of that habit, you take it, especially if it's going to be offered to you. But I agree with you that if he doesn't end up the Raiders head coach, not a bad situation to turn back to with an individual you're friendly with a young, promising quarterback, and then a chance a year from now to perhaps even be more attractive.
These coaches usually can decide whether or not they want to go for that year off. And they say, okay, you know what, I think I've kind of had enough. They might go into television. Maybe they go into radio. Maybe they also do some like special assistant consulting work, quality control,
We've seen
something
that.
like
Yep.
that, right? But if they really want to stay in it, they go for the trampoline effect. And that trampoline effect is exactly what you just spoke of. They take a still high-level coordinator's job, which will then allow them to bounce back and become a head coach again. The trampoline effect. That's what I call it. And I think that's what Dable is looking forward to now. I don't sense that he wanted to sit out.
Yeah, he's basically proven to be an NFL lifer. Not that he's an old man, but he doesn't seem to be the type of guy that was anxious to do what Mike Tomlin or Sean McDermott may do.
No.
Which is take a year off or not coach again. That just doesn't seem to be within his DNA. So as it stands right now, we had 10 openings to start. There are 3 left. Go ahead. You wanted to add something?
No. Before we go to the rest of the head coaches, let's stick with the Giant theme. Mike Kafka to the Detroit Lions, reportedly as their offensive coordinator.
Well, no. Drew
passing
Petzing.
game coordinator.
A high-level offensive position is how it's being
I believe they
labeled.
called it passing game coordinator. Okay, not OC. You're correct.
Yes, Drew Petzing from the Cardinals got that job.
Yeah, let's be particular about the semantics here.
Yeah.
Passing game coordinator with the Lions, working for Dan Campbell. And if you'll recall, the Giants had one heck of a game in Detroit this past year. Jameis Winston was playing quarterback. Gunnar Olszewski threw a touchdown pass to Jameis Winston.
And Dan Campbell must have fallen in love with that.
Of
with
course
his
he
trickery
did. And
from the
by the
opposing
way,
sideline.
how could he not be impressed? That was one of the games that showed there were dents in the Lions' armor because the Giants wound up blowing that game and losing in overtime. But it was one of the more impressive, can I use that in quotes, impressive losses the Giants had this year?
Well, they were able to put points on the board.
They really did.
Yeah. They remain
and again,
competitive
with
in that game.
Jameis Winston as the quarterback. So that was also a nice game for Wan'Dale Robinson, as you will recall. So there's no doubt in my mind that Dan Campbell saw that firsthand, and I have to believe that's one of the reasons he picked up the phone and wanted to talk to Mike Kafka. And now apparently Mike has a job there, and I wish him all the best. I really like Mike Kafka a lot. I think he was a dynamite guy when he was here. I think he was a good coach. I think we saw the results when he had control of the Giants' offense and or control of the team. The results were better than when he wasn't. And I'm going to leave it there.
Yeah, I thought Kafka did a nice job, even behind the scenes, to navigate a very tough circumstance where he had to all of a sudden take over the entire team. I think, he tried to present himself attractively to the defense and the special teams and balance out his role as the offensive coordinator and the play caller. And, of course, Tim Kelly helped with respect to that, taking over an additional role. But you figured he was going to land somewhere given his tie-ins across the league. And I always like to bring up, I tweeted this out, and I don't know if you were aware of this. I always like to talk about relationships in the NFL, that you can't overlook if there's a crossing of the roads between individuals.
Well, the Kansas City relationship with Reed.
No, but there's a relationship with the Lions that I don't think a lot of people realize. So how about this? Drew Petzing, who I referenced, is the OC for the Lions. He was, in 2015, on the Vikings staff. He was an offensive assistant.
Okay.
And you know who was a quarterback in training camp on that Vikings roster?
Wow.
Mike Kafka. Now, they weren't together long because Kafka...
Okay, I did not know that.
Yeah, he went on injured reserve and then was released. So he wasn't with the Vikings for that full season, but he was with them for a few months. And don't tell me that, a backup quarterback trying to make the roster didn't maybe gel with an offensive assistant.
Makes a lot of sense.
Young guy up and coming. And now Petzing is probably saying to himself, all right, who do I want to surround myself? Because remember, he was an external hire. He wasn't a guy that had tie-ins to Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell's going outside the box.
Correct.
And I respect that, by the way. I don't think it's a bad thing when Campbell, who has been around the block, he was with Sean Payton in New Orleans, he says, you know what? It's time to infuse new blood, new perspective. So I'm going to bring in somebody who I don't necessarily have close tie-ins with, and then I'm going to let him maybe bring in somebody who I've seen from afar that I think could add a different layer to our offensive play calling. I think Campbell deserves credit for doing something like that. It's easy... Paul, in this league, it's easy to turn to your friends and your colleagues. It's difficult to turn to individuals that you don't necessarily have a great relationship with.
Now, what is interesting to me is that Kafka, if you want to put a hook in that wall and hang your coat on it, the fact that he worked with Andy Reid, who was a very, very intelligent, smart, and winner in this league, and was part of what helped groom Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
And then comes here and works with a very smart offensive mind in Brian Daboll and helps groom and develop Jackson Dart. The difference here is that Jared Goff is an old man compared to those two kids. Mahomes and Dart, those guys are young pups compared to Jared Goff, who at this point in his career, I don't know that there's much he hasn't seen. So that is a little bit interesting that they went to Mike, but I understand the relationship you're talking about, and I'm sure the game against the Giants this year had a lot to do with it as well from Campbell's perspective. But this is not a grooming young quarterback situation.
No, not at all. But I think Kafka also, as a former quarterback who has experience, and even with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, has also been around his fair share of veteran quarterbacks. So
no doubt.
I don't think that's going to be an issue. And Goff is coming from an offense with Ben Johnson 2 years ago, because he became the Bears head coach. They're used to implementing and thinking outside the box with all of those trick plays that they ran.
do.
So I think what
Kafka will do that.
Correct. What he'll bring to the table is something that Goff is at least used to, as well as the bulk of the offensive personnel. So I think the fit makes a lot of sense, and then the Petzing connection makes it probably even more attractive. So as a connected layer to that, what I was getting at was the fact that, so there are 3 head coaching positions still open out of the 10 that we started the process with. The Raiders we mentioned, then the Arizona Cardinals, which probably is the least talked about head coaching position, it seems, right? You just don't hear much about the interviews and everything.
It's not exactly a high priority for many people.
Well, I wasn't necessarily insinuating that. I just said that there wasn't the talk of the town surrounding that. We've heard a lot more about Las Vegas, and then this next one, which to me is something that Harbaugh and the Giants are closely paying attention to, and that's what's going on in Cleveland. Now, there has been mixed reports. It seems as if Jim Schwartz is receiving heavy consideration, their defensive coordinator under Kevin Stefanski. And I thought he did a nice job with the Lions, by the way, and I'm surprised he hasn't gotten another gig yet. Remember, they had a few winning seasons there with Jim Schwartz. And then a name that may not be familiar to most is Nate Scheelhaus. He is the Rams passing game coordinator, so he's one of those guys groomed by Sean McVay. And then somebody who got an interview is Todd Monken, former Ravens offensive coordinator under, of course, John Harbaugh. And we're not confirming or anything with respect to who Harbaugh's eyeing or any of the rumors you may have heard that Harbaugh's going to bring in. But there is a tie-in, of course, to Baltimore, given Monken was there the last few seasons, and he helped Lamar Jackson reach MVP level. So it's sort of a wait-and-see approach. If Harbaugh is interested in bringing in Monken, you first got to wait and see, much like we were talking about Dable's waiting and seeing, right? What's going to happen with a head coaching position before you taking a coordinator job. But the other thing that I found quite fascinating a little bit with respect to Cleveland, as I've been monitoring the reports, Paul, and I said this earlier, and I'll say it again, there's only 32 of these jobs, and you would think that, most guys who want to get their first gig are not going to be picky, but there have been several candidates that have dropped out of the Cleveland race.
Yes.
And you just wonder what's going on there, what are they hearing, what have they been told by colleagues?
Well, they have a Pro Bowl quarterback. I mean, why wouldn't you want that job? I mean, come on now.
Well, that's a whole other... Listen, that should tell you all you need to know about Pro Bowl selections and so forth.
It really does.
But you know what? It's a reminder in all seriousness that the All-Pro and how those votes are gathered is far more indicative. If you truly want to tell the story of how a guy performed over the course of the season, I'd much rather point to, was he selected All-Pro as opposed to whether or not he was selected a Pro Bowler, because... And what Paul is referring to, in case some of you are not connecting the dots, is Shedeur Sanders was named as a replacement for the quarterback position, with Drake May having to pull out because he's playing in the Super Bowl. So what we get to, and this happens every single year, we get to the 5th or 6th quarterback on the list that winds up taking part in the Pro Bowl. And I'm not blaming.
5th or 6th?
Yeah.
He should be 26th on the list.
Well, I'm not disputing that. But in all seriousness, we haven't gotten that deep into the roster.
That's what he should be, though.
I'm not. Listen, he was a rookie quarterback who did not start anywhere near the entire season. I mean, the fact that, and I didn't look that carefully at the pecking order, but how they even got to him is once again... all the statement you need to know about the whole Pro Bowl selection process.
What a mystery that is, huh?
That is bizarre. And I know there have been
bizarre.
a few...
That's a good word for it.
Well, there have been even a few Giants players on social media that I know have been very active in voicing their displeasure, not necessarily towards Shedeur Sanders. And I don't want to make him the guinea pig. I mean, he didn't do anything.
No.
It's not like he went out and campaigned.
No.
It's just whatever the voting is and they go by just goes to show you a lot of it is... whether or not you have put up the campaign signs and have won the hearts of former players, current players, whatever the heck goes into it. I never was a fan of it. I always thought it was a publicity tour, and I think this has further proven that.
Enough said.
Yeah, but getting back to where we got off track a little bit was whether or not, that job is attractive and so forth. And Kevin Stefanski, he had 2 really good seasons there. Let's not forget, it's not as if it's impossible to win in Cleveland.
He was AFC Coach of the Year twice.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering whether or not this is a lot more than X's and O's that perhaps is sending some signals the way of some of these potential candidates. But it looks like those names that I mentioned, are still very much in the fold. And once Cleveland makes a decision, I think that's going to have a bit of a domino effect on the Giants maybe rounding out their staff, as well as some of the other teams, too, that I'm sure have interest in some of the coordinators and assistants that were under Stefanski. Plus, Stefanski's probably waiting and seeing, as he was formally introduced as the Falcons head coach today, whether or not he's going to be able to bring over some assistants that were on his staff. So a lot of this is the wait and see approach, but you figure as we knock on the door of the Super Bowl and the Combine, that those 3 head coaching positions will be filled, because by the time you get to the Combine, Paul, as somebody that has been to that event more often than not, you want to have at least your head coach squared away so that he can meet and greet with potential assistants and he could try to get his staff finalized by that time. You really don't want to wait longer than the Combine once everything starts
Yeah.
to go into full motion with the GM and you as the head man in terms of who you're going to target in free agency, because then everything else will quickly fall into place and will follow suit.
One other note is that the Shrine Bowl is tonight
Yep.
on NFL Network at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So I invite you to watch that if you'd like to take a look at some of the prospects who will be in the NFL draft. You don't usually get guys who are much higher than the third round in the Shrine Bowl. The Senior Bowl is more for your first and second rounders. Your Shrine Bowl will occasionally get a third rounder, maybe as high as a second rounder in there. But these are usually more day 3 picks than they are day 1 or 2. But that doesn't mean you can't find players in there that are worthy. And so I definitely will be paying attention tonight for sure.
All right, so that's the latest in terms of what's happening around the league. Shrine Bowl, as Paul mentioned, as we start the draft process. Both of those things intermingling here as we move forward on Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants. As we are broadcasting for the Giants podcast studio presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. So let's open up the phone lines, and we will start off today's festivities. Let's go to Antonio in Delaware with us here on BBKL. What's happening, Antonio?
Hi, good afternoon, guys. How are you doing?
Hi.
Doing well. What's on your mind?
Quick question for you. In terms of the GM and the release of Kevin Abrams, I think one of the issues, I guess, the head coach has is probably like they don't use void years in their contracts. And then also in terms of Slayton contract, me personally, I think it was kind of a mistake that Joe Shane didn't really think ahead of giving Slayton that contract. Because right now, you give Slayton that contract, and now you have to pay Wandell now. Now, my question is to you guys now, if you are Wandell's agent, does it make sense for them to come to the Giants and say, okay, I'm going to give you a similar contract, but now you can't really pay Slayton that contract, which is like a number 3 and number 4 wide receiver contract. So what do you think the Giants' options are in terms of dealing with Wandell, and how can they restructure Slayton's contract so that it doesn't make sense to pay a wide receiver 3 or 4 that type of money? And also, do you guys know if the Ravens use void years in their contracts?
All right, well, we'll tackle a lot of things that you threw out there, Antonio, and appreciate the phone call. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure whether or not the Ravens have subscribed to void contracts. I mean, Eric DeCosta, their general manager, is a very well-respected GM who was in place, taking over for Ozzie Newsome, who was there before. So Harbaugh had the luxury to work with 2 really good eyes for talent, and also a very strong front office that has done a nice job putting together rosters and drafting personnel. But as far as whether or not they subscribe to voiding contracts, off the top of my head, I'd have to look into that. You can always restructure a contract, though. Whether or not you subscribe to that philosophy is irrelevant. It's what Paul and I have talked about all the time, the idea of kicking the can down the road. If you give a player a contract and you decide after the fact that you need to create more space or tweak it, it can be done. It may impact you then down the road, but this idea that even if you don't put void years in, that it can't be done, I think is a little bit misleading from that standpoint.
The
Go ahead.
Ravens
Yeah.
do use them.
Okay, so there you go.
They do use them. It is one of the techniques, one of the many ways that you can deal with the salary cap. Are they like one of the leading teams using them? No, they're not, but they do use them. The Giants with Joe Shane tend to shy away from those.
And then with respect to Wandell Robinson, my personal opinion, if I'm his agent as well as Wandell Robinson, and I think I would say this for most players coming off their rookie contracts, and Paul, if you disagree, curious your perspective, you only get so many opportunities to hit free agency. So I'm looking to cash in. I'm looking to make the most of my value right now. I don't think, at least from his lens, it would make sense to take a 1-year deal and then risk, God forbid, you get hurt and then your value going down. So if I'm Wandell Robinson and his agent, to me, whether it's the Giants or another team, it's I want a multi-year contract with stability and security as opposed to going down the road of playing it all up again on an expiring deal.
Well, you're talking about a receiver who's rather diminutive, okay? I mean, he's not even 5'10", and he has put up some really impressive numbers, 90-plus catches each of the last 2 years, then had 1,000 yards this season in a career year. Look, I will tell you there are people, and I was not one of them when he got drafted, who said to me, I don't know about his durability. He's going to get beaten up. He's going to take his hits, especially if you use him in a variety of ways like the Giants have. He gets whacked around pretty good.
Sure.
And I remember when he was drafted, I had some football people say to me, he may be a good, exciting young player, but I don't know if he's going to last his second contract. You kind of got to be careful when you use a second-round pick on a guy who's that small and is going to touch the ball that much and is going to take that many hits. So if I'm Wan'Dale Robinson, who, by the way, has already had a few injuries over his young career.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
I'm thinking, not only do I want a nice 4-year deal, I want a really nice guarantee. Because even he has to be wondering in the back of his own mind, how many more big-time years am I going to have left? And I suspect that there are teams out there who have a better current position than the Giants do, who also know that if they add a dynamic slot receiver to their team, it could take them even to another level. And I expect that those teams will offer him quite a pretty penny, and it's not going to be hard for one of those clubs to outbid the Giants, because I don't think the Giants will chase him up the economic ladder and run him all the way to the bank and do everything they can to bring him back. I just don't think so. I think, if he would come in at a very modest rate, under modest terms, I think they'd love to have him back, 1,000%. But he's one of those guys, and I hate to use the word, and I know you're going to get mad at me, I hate to use the word overpay. But I suspect when you talk about dollars per production, I suspect that he is going to get paid a very pretty penny by somebody to leave.
Well, all it takes is one team, so it really doesn't matter if the entire league is not on the same page. But I do think there are a few teams that certainly can envision utilizing him within their offense, given his versatility and his speed and his elusiveness. And if they feel that they will use him as a primary target, because I think that would be a big part of it. You're not going to pay him that money and have him as a complimentary piece.
No.
Then it would make sense to make an offer his way. The other thing, at least from the Giants' perspective, that we maybe weren't necessarily looking at about a month or two ago is now it also depends on what Harbaugh thinks of Wan'Dale Robinson, right? If you're Joe Schoen, you're going to have conversations with your head coach, and then whoever Harbaugh brings in as his wide receivers coach, and they're going to get their perspective. I don't know what Harbaugh thinks of Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm not saying that he doesn't think highly of him. I mean, clearly Harbaugh mentioned he was watching Giants film as he was considering this job, but you can think highly of a player, but you also have to take into consideration the salary cap repercussions of paying a player. So, that throws in another element in play. How Joe Schoen feels about Wan'Dale Robinson, he's got his opinions, but he also is judging him from an internal view. Harbaugh now has a different perspective, having not been in the building. So that could be on the same line, or that could be very different, and that could very well influence how much money they are willing to spend. But once again, to get back to the caller's question, I can't envision a scenario where Wan'Dale Robinson and his camp would be open to wanting a 1-year deal with the Giants or even another team, considering what Paul and I just laid out in terms of the level of risk. And I don't think Wan'Dale Robinson is necessarily even utilizing Darius Slayton's deal as a bargaining chip. I don't think one thing
to do with
because I think Slayton's a completely different player with a different skill set.
Totally
so
different player.
If you're Wan'Dale Robinson's representation, why does it help you by bringing up Darius Slayton's contract? Even to other teams, forget the Giants. So I really don't think there's any correlation there with respect to the point or the concern about the contract. All right, let's head back to the phone lines. We got John on Staten Island with us here on BBKL. What's happening, John?
I think the Giants should get rid of Jalen Hyatt. He's very bad. I think they should try to trade him. He doesn't play as good.
Well, I don't know how much trade value, in fairness, John, Jalen Hyatt is going to have. I mean, given to your point, the production has been up and down, and he hasn't been able to also at times stay healthy, too. So you take that into consideration, and he's still on a rookie contract, Paul.
He sure
and he's
is.
got 1 year left. So
He sure is.
from that standpoint, once again, and Harbaugh and the new coaching staff will weigh in on this, if they feel there's value and it's not a whole burden on the salary cap because of the rookie contract, then it makes sense to keep a player like that. If you don't see a point of him being in the rotation or the mix, then I could see maybe them moving on from him. But given it's not putting a huge dent into the cap, the idea to rush away from him and trade him when his value is not extremely high, Paul, I don't know if that's maximizing right now the value of the deal you have on the books.
He's one of those guys who, because
and appreciate
of
the contract,
changes in the coaching staff, you give him a clean slate and you say, okay, we're going to start from square one again. And I know, it's been a rough 3 years for him. I get that. But it's a low risk, high reward scenario. He's not costing them but pennies.
Yeah.
So he's under contract. You bring him to camp. You let him try to earn a spot. But here's what you don't do. You don't give a foot in the door on the roster. You tell him,
No, he's gotta earn
you're
it.
starting at zero now, okay? You're back to square one. You do not pass go. You do not collect $500. You're going back to square one. You are now as even as anybody else coming into this team, and you've got to earn a roster spot. And if he does, you keep him. If he doesn't, you cut him.
And from Hyatt's perspective, new coaching staff, completely new opportunity to prove yourself. So that could very well help his cause. That could be attractive. But I'm with you, Paul. There's no guarantee that he's going to have a spot, that he's going to be in the wide receiver depth chart, that he's going to make X amount of plays, get X amount of snaps. There's none of that. It's you keep him at least on the 90-man roster because, once again, he's not eating in so much of the salary cap. So shedding him now
makes no sense.
What does it do for you?
Nothing.
You get to keep 90 guys on the roster. Then when training camp starts in the preseason, if he's being outperformed by everybody else, it's an easy decision. You're not holding on to him because he was a former draft pick. You're not renewing the scholarship, if you want to word it that way. But it's way too premature in March and April to talk about cutting somebody who has still 1 year left on his rookie deal. I don't see that helping the Giants' cause in any capacity. All right, let's head back to the lines. We got Jason in New Haven. Jason, welcome aboard. What do you got for us?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Doing all right.
Hi.
What's on your mind?
Good. I just have 2 points, and I can take it off the air or if you want to respond. The Wan'Dale, I guess, dilemma. I called and I talked to Paul last week. I don't know if you remember Paul, but I'm a big proponent of 2 things. Not letting homegrown talent walk out the door if the number's reasonable, and surrounding Dart with as much quality players on his rookie deal that we can get. And with Malik, we'll see how he's recovering. Of course, I don't know that information, of course, and I'm sure you guys don't either. Coming off a knee injury. Slayton, and while I'm a big Slayton fan, his inconsistency last year. Hyatt, the big unknown still in year 3 or 4 he's going into. And not much left on the depth. We'll see what they do in the draft. If the number's not ridiculous, man, he has a good rapport with Dart. I think you keep him personally. Over 1,000 yards last year, and it's continued to getting better. He doesn't seem to have any ill effects of that knee injury he had his first or second year he got. So I'm a Wan'Dale. If you could keep him, if he's not asking for an astronomical amount of money, then that changes the dynamic. But if the money's reasonable, I think you got to keep some of these players. I'm tired of seeing these homegrown players just walk out the door. So that's my first point.
The
Point,
money won't be reasonable, though. He's going to get bowled over by at least 2 or 3 teams. I'm sure of it. And so that's going to throw out your plan. I will tell you this. I don't disagree with your philosophy about doing what you can to give Dart as many weapons as possible, which is why, to be frank with you, Tate out of Ohio State at wide receiver at number 5 is not something that I would object to one bit. because I think he could be a very good weapon for this quarterback.
Right.
And Jason, let me just add one thing before you go to your next point. I think the other area that hurts the Giants with respect to the money is I'm just skimming through
The
some of the
receiver free agent
correct.
pool is thin.
I'm looking through the pool. Well, forget thin. What I'm looking at is I'm looking at, Paul, if there's other wide receivers that are similar to Wan'Dale's skill set.
Oh, slot guys.
That's the other aspect. It's not so much the volume, because you're not going to compare, for example, Mike Evans is a free agent. Mike Evans and Wan'Dale Robinson are on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Right.
So if I'm a front office executive, I wouldn't even put them under the same umbrella. I'm not seeing a lot of similarity to Wan'Dale, which means if you are specifically looking for a speedster who will play in the slot, Wan'Dale's almost on an island all by himself. So that means that he's not competing with a lot of other unrestricted free agents.
Supply and demand.
Correct. And that brings more competition the Giants' way. You got to look at it from that lens as well.
He's going to get a boatload. I'm telling you.
Right, but but like I said, we have tons of cap space in the next 2 years. But I'll go on to my next point, so I don't other callers to get in. I don't know if you guys can respond to it yet, because I know it hasn't been official. But according to some other beat reporters, national beat reporters, that Harbaugh has brought in Denard Wilson as his DC. I'm not asking for you guys to say yay or nay. I'm just going off the reports from what I've seen on TV, social media. If that is the case, I personally like the hire. I remember one of the big things this past season that I had an issue with is the defense. And the quarterback of the Saints said it, and everybody was in an uproar, but it was true, about confusing quarterback, right? Using coverages, bringing people up to the line, disguising blitzes, dropping people back, rotating your safeties. Maybe it's a cover 3, but when the ball is slapped, it's a cover 4. And, so I think Wilson brings that, and hopefully this will help he was a secondary coach, and hopefully this will help our defense as a whole in terms of throwing disguises and confusing the quarterback, which I felt we didn't really do a good job of. So I appreciate you guys taking a call, and I'll listen off here.
All right, Jason. Thanks for the phone call. Appreciate it.
2 thoughts on Wilson. And you're right. We are not in a position to confirm or deny. But I will say this. He does prefer press corners, and that should be music to any press corner who may be in his 3rd or 4th year in the league, who has had some ups and downs with different styles and philosophies. And that's about all I'm going to say with that. That's number one. Number two, you're right about his blitzing. He is not a heavy, frenetic blitz guy like Wink Martindale, who blitzes over 40% of the time. That's not what he does. But what he does do,
or Brian Flores, too, is
correct.
A good example. Yeah.
He when he does, he's about an average amount of blitz packages. But what he does do with them is he is very strategic in how he uses them. It's not always about, Wink used to say pressure breaks pipes. So he would just say, I'm sending 5, 6, and 7 on 3 plays in a row, and we're just going to come at you like a wave. And it's like the Hoover Dam busted. And that's how you're going to throw heat at the offensive line and the quarterback. That's not Denard Wilson. Denard Wilson is about, let me play mind games with the Rubik's Cube. And let me see which type of blitz I want to use, which style of blitz, who I'm going to send, who I'm going to disguise. He has a very calculated type of blitz, as opposed to Wink, who is, I'm just going to break the dam. Different style. And that's what I think the caller is trying to talk about. And yes, that could be incredibly effective.
And just in terms of, and we could talk at least about Wilson from a background perspective. Once again, we're not confirming or denying any of the reports that are out there because the Giants have not commented on what Harbaugh's staff is going to look like. But Wilson, he was with Harbaugh for a year. He was the Ravens DB's coach in 2023. He was not the defensive coordinator. He became a DC for the first time ever with Tennessee in 24 and 25. So that is his DC experience. Prior to that, laundry list of experience as a defensive backs coach. He was with the Eagles. He was with the Jets. So that is his primary background. But he clearly got an opportunity with Tennessee. and there is a year connection with Harbaugh in Baltimore in 2023, and he's got a good track record in terms of developing some of those secondary players, whether they're in Philadelphia or in Baltimore. So that is an attractive piece of his resume, but he did not, once again, call defensive plays under Harbaugh. Harbaugh had very different offensive and defensive coordinators under him that he worked with, and I went through this, if you missed, with Matt Sitek last week. I went through pretty much his history of all of his DCs, all of his OCs, where they rank, so you could check one of the episodes from last week if you really want to deep dive into that, and we can certainly revisit it as the staff gets finalized, but that's at least Wilson's background with respect to what he's done across the league. All right, let's head back to the phone lines. Let's check in with Robert in Texas joining us on BBKL. What's happening, Robert? What do you got for us?
Yeah, how you guys doing, man? I just wanted to say that as a Giants fan here in Texas, especially around Cowboy fans out here, you know, I'm so excited for Harbaugh being there. It just seems like the Coughlin days are back. And my main concern to ask you guys is, will big name players finally want to come to New York? That's my biggest thing, because it seems that the Giants were, like, no one wanted to come to New York, it seemed like, and I'm not sure that's true, but what do you guys think about that? Mine is just to the point. I just hope the Giants become what they used to be in the 90s and the 2000s, you know? We're one of the best franchises in the NFL, definitely.
Well, I'd love to know who in your mind you think did not want to come to the Giants in previous years, just as a tangible example or evidence, Robert. It sounds more like you're reading the tea leaves and just formulating an opinion as opposed to hearing it directly from a player, because I don't know if there's validity behind what you're insinuating. I think a lot of what goes on in the NFL has to do with money in free agency. And if you go back to not too long ago, 2016, the Giants actually made a huge splash in free agency. You know, that was when they brought in Olivia Vernon, Janoris Jenkins, and Snacks. And, I mean, that was pretty substantial, Paul, right? Compared to history. And even when Coughlin was here, the Giants weren't known, Paul. And if you disagree, you disagree. I think they brought in complimentary free agents, but they weren't necessarily every offseason bringing in star names that at least I would put under that label.
You know, you'd like to believe that Harbaugh could be a bit of a magnet, and maybe if there's a free agent deciding between two teams, that could tip the scale. You'd like to believe that. I don't necessarily know if that's true, because George Washington speaks louder than John Harbaugh.
Yep.
Okay? I think every player will tell you, and every agent will tell you, that George Washington has the loudest voice of all. That's number one. But here's where I will say it can come into play. If the Giants make the playoffs this year, if they do, now right now they're not there, but if they make the playoffs in 26, the next offseason, you may see 2, 3, 4, 5 of these veterans who are willing to come to you on a one-year free agent deal because they think they can help be the missing piece to get you to the Super Bowl. But you got to be a playoff-level team first to get those free agents to take those one-year minimum contracts, because now they're thinking, you know what, I'll take a one-year gamble here because I think we got a chance to really go far. I think I'm going to go. I'm going to hop on that train while it's pulling out of the station. The Giants are not at that level yet.
I think right now, to answer your question, Robert, where it could help is, and I don't know if this is maybe what you were getting at too, Paul, but I could see complementary players, maybe, you know, really enforcing the back end of the roster.
If that's who those guys wind up being.
Well, but even, I'm saying even here in year one, some of his former Ravens players who had a great deal of respect for him, who are not going to make mega bucks on the market, if Harbaugh offers them an opportunity to be a backup offensive lineman or a fullback or a complimentary piece,
they might just stay
I don't
where
think
they
that's
are.
crazy. No, they could, but it also is not crazy that they may want to continue to play for Harbaugh or a coach and come over, especially if the money is reasonable and the same. That's where I think that's where Harbaugh to me serves as a tiebreaker. But if you're talking about Pro Bowl, All-Pro-S type of players that are commanding big bucks,
not going to happen.
At the end of the day, the market is going to dictate where they're going to land much more so than the head coach. And I'll go off on a whole other tangent, and we'll let you go, Robert, and appreciate the question and the phone call. I'll go off on a completely other area. I'll build the bridge to what's going on in collegiate sports right now, in college football and college basketball. Okay, Paul? And this is my point here. 6-7 years ago, I would have told you players are going to go to Alabama because they want to play for Nick Saban.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Saban is attractive. He's got a track record of grooming players, having NFL contacts. He'll get you to the league. Okay? Go play
And
for
he'll
Saban.
get your championships on the way.
True. But at the end of the day, you want to make a lot of money. He'll get you to
I
the
know.
professional level. Okay? Now we move the calendar forward 6 or 7 years, and I know Saban's no longer at Alabama, but whether it's Dabo Sweeney, any of the other big
Yeah, but the
names.
NIL is one of the reasons why he's not there anymore. He was
Okay.
fed up with the system.
Well,
he couldn't deal with it.
And that's what I was getting at. The infusion of NIL money, which, let's face it, is the equivalency of NFL free agency money,
It is.
has now proven players are not attracted and making decisions because of who's running the program. They're making decisions based on the amount of money and the attractiveness of the guarantee and the contract and the endorsements that these programs can hand out. Why do you think there's a whole controversy? And actually, Dabo Sweeney, remember, called out Ole Miss for trying to steal one of his players from Clemson. What was it, a few days ago? You know, it's the war that's going on behind closed doors. It's very similar. The parallel between the NFL and college football, I don't even want to say it's blurry anymore. I think it's crystal clear. So that, to me, if you're going down the road of Harbaugh being attractive, and I'm not saying that he's not, but I think the money and the market is doing a lot more of the heavy lifting than anything that a guy atop the totem pole can do.
No disagreement here, Lance. George Washington will always speak the loudest.
Well, it's going to take a little bit more, in fairness, than George Washington to speak. I think you got to change a president, Paul. I get your point, and I'm singing your tune, but I think you got to maybe change it Andrew Jackson, okay? You know, there's 2 digits on that bill, okay? And then we can maybe get, I know there's not a lot of triple-digit bills, but you may need another president.
Should we just
to
say
sell
that
your
Fort
point.
Knox serves the best food?
Perhaps, yeah. Or the Treasury Department. Why don't you use that, okay?
Yeah, really.
Instead of choosing a president. And if you want to weigh in on the historical nature of money and its production, Paul will be more than happy to weigh in on that as we have still a few more minutes left on BBKL.
my.
All right, let's go to a different Rob. This one is in Connecticut with us here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. What's happening, Rob?
Hey, Lance, Dot, how's it going?
Hello?
Doing well. What do you got for us?
Did you get out of the snow okay?
Geez, and Crow, I'll tell you, I'll tell you what, I just got done shoveling the patio, so we're all good to go now. All
Great.
colors have been
Very nice.
applicated. Yeah. But, hey, with regards to George Washington, do you know he originally was a Tory back like in 1750s? So he was going to be he was on the other side originally, so enough said about that.
I did not know that.
You learn something new every day.
By the way, how long does it take to shovel out the Yale Bowl?
But, by the way, I went to the Yale Bowl and saw Keith Hamilton when he was a rookie back in, what was that, 1993?
For Pitt?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They played they played the Patriots, I think, in a like a scrimmage or something, and I saw Keith Hamilton. Yeah, he was good. I'm telling you, he was really good.
Excellent player. Go ahead.
So, P-Dot, did you hear real quick? Kadarius Toney is in for the head coaching job of the Cleveland Browns. Just so you know.
Well, boy, now we're really learning some new news.
We are really we're going well off the
deep
rails
end, too.
here,
The
man.
rails. I mean, we've lost the rails.
This
They've been
engine
losing.
has
Yes.
totally left the track.
Rob, let's try to return to
What do you
planet
got?
Earth
Go
if
ahead.
we can. Yes.
Okay, look, this team has, somebody earlier said dilemmas. This team has no bad dilemmas right now. Coach Harbaugh is anything right now. We're talking about Bernard. So Bernard's going to be fine because Coach Harbaugh is the head coach. That's why we're playing with house money as far as I'm concerned. I mean, how does it feel, gentlemen, to be number one? No Mike McCarthy. There's no doldrums like this whole Mike McCarthy news. I mean, Pittsburgh Steelers hate life right now. It is great to be a Giants fan. And that's the real thing I wanted to ask you is, what do you think we're going to pick for our number one after listening to Tony Pauline and John Schmeltz this morning on draft season? I have no idea who we're going to draft number one.
Well, the good news is we still got some time to analyze that, Rob, and appreciate the phone call. Remember, we were talking about Wan'Dale Robinson. Jermaine Illuminor is another key free agent. Giants got to get through that before we even entertain
For
because
sure.
the needs, the value is going to change. I mean, we know that the Mel Kiper mock draft, right, was recently released, and we might as well get to that briefly here, Paul, because this was here on Giants.com. I know we put up a latest article. So Mel Kiper's, his first mock draft, he has the Giants, and as it stands right now, it's only January 27th. I can't emphasize this enough. He's got them taking Carnell Tate, the wide receiver out of Ohio State, who we've mentioned in passing on previous shows. And remember, this is why you got to wait out free agency. In the event that the Giants don't retain Wan'Dale Robinson, and one of the earlier callers was talking about, okay, Malik Neighbors is coming off a significant knee injury. Darius Slayton had his ups and downs. Yeah, if they lose a key free agent who had over 1,000 yards, it's understandable that they may prioritize a playmaker at that position, and then you connect the dots and you say, okay, a little bit more steam connected to Carnell Tate, it may make sense in the end.
I think most people who follow college football in the draft would tell you that he's actually the equivalent value there. I mean, he works at 5. That's not a stretch. And that's the key here, because you want the need and the value to meet. That's always the idea, right? And Tate just happens to have the value, and it looks like it could be a need. So it makes a lot of sense. Right now, as I sit here today, and I'm now going to start getting into my draft stuff, I will start it this week. The Shrine Bowl is tonight. The Senior Bowl practices start today at 2:30. I'm going to go home and watch that. Senior Bowl this weekend. Now it's time for me to start getting into draft stuff. Man, it's a headache. It is a major, major, major headache, especially when you're up at 5, because the truth of the matter is, you don't like to be picking there because you do have needs. You'd much rather be picking at the bottom of the first round where you just say, best player available, I don't care. Well, you can't do that at 5. You got to hit. That's the other thing. You got to hit. You can't make a mistake at 5. When you do, it's painful.
And also because of maybe the lack of depth and attractiveness at the quarterback position, there may not be an attractive option to move down.
Only one.
Yeah.
Only one quarterback's going in the top 5. That's it.
Because no team is going to have an interest to move up. And now, listen, other trades have happened where teams have moved up to grab non-quarterbacks, but I think the approach is more wait and see if you really love a guy as opposed to doing something well in advance. So that also limits the options if the Giants were of the philosophy, okay, we like a few players at 5, but it's not life and death. We'd rather maybe get a few extra picks. The problem is, and I say this all the time, and I know it's cliche, but it takes 2 to tango. There's validity behind that. You may want to move down. Good luck finding another suitor that wants to meet you there. If you can't find it, it doesn't matter how much you love the idea of moving down.
But I think right now, preliminary, my feeling would be Tate right now, as I sit here today.
And once again, it would make sense if some of the things we're speculating about come to fruition in free agency. Now, the other position that I'll throw out, and I like to talk more, especially this early in the game, at position more so than player, is if you do lose Illuminor, okay, I'm not the type of person that is if you're going to put the offensive tackle at right tackle, it makes no sense. No, you're going to face an elite pass rusher on the opposite side.
Sure.
So I could justify taking a player that would start out at right tackle as a top 5 pick. I completely disagree, especially if they have experience playing left in college. And you're going to flip them. The Chargers, John Harbaugh's brother is the perfect example of that in terms of what they have done in the draft.
What he did with Wirfs.
No, Wirfs went to Tampa. You talk about Slater.
Slater.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Slater, who was the earlier pick.
Right.
And then, what they...
But Wirfs also flopped it.
No, Wirfs is another one that flopped, too.
He's another flopper.
Absolutely. So, flopping... Heck, Tyron Smith for the Cowboys.
Yeah.
If you want to go a little bit further back. Okay? There's been plenty of left tackles that started out on the right side and then moved to the left side. But the reason why, to me, that conversation is so simplistic, even to this day, with the evolution of pass rushers, Paul, in the NFL... Most teams have guys that'll kill you on the left side and the right side. So why are we now saying, well, I can only use that high of a pick on a franchise left tackle? Well, if your house is not in order on the right side, who cares how good your left tackle is? Your left tackle's not blocking the right side. And if you look at most of the teams that the Giants are going up against, or if you just look at the Giants personnel, think about, when we were talking about this all last summer, the volume of pass rushers with the addition of Abdul Carter. And now you have to count for 3 or 4 different rotational pass rushers. Well, don't you think teams that went up against the Giants were saying, our house can't just be in order on the left side. It's got to be in order on the right side. So I am totally fine with if they lose Jermaine Illuminor and they say, we don't love some of our options on the depth chart, we want to use a high pick on a young player, then I could justify that selection even if he's going to start out on the right side. And with, by the way, Andrew Thomas's injury history, it also doesn't hurt to have a guy that you could flip out to the left side in a pinch who was exposed to that for maybe several seasons on the collegiate level. So you can tie in both of those scenarios there. Let's head back to the phone lines. Roberto is in Florida with us here on BBKL. What's happening, Roberto?
Hey, I was just in my own thoughts here, real fast. Patrick Ricard, right? Imagine if he follows Harbaugh there.
Well, that's an example of what I was alluding to.
A real good fullback.
Fullback for the Ravens, sure.
Also, what about if McFadden and Wendell goes, right? Now we got no problem keeping Illuminor. Also, about Downs, I think his name is Downs from Michigan. I've been following that kid. I think he's a solid run stopper from Michigan.
He's the kind of guy who, if you're going to play a 3-safety package, and Denard Wilson is a guy who will do that, he will play a big nickel. That would be a guy who you would, depending upon if he might be the defensive coordinator, suddenly Downs becomes a potential guy at 5. That's not out of the question. There are 2 offensive tackles who certainly could possibly be in play at 5 if that's the way you want to go. So there's a safety, there's a wide receiver, there's 2 offensive tackles. We've already given you possibilities, and, guess what? If you're 5, one of those 4 guys is going to be there.
Right, yeah. And all it takes is also a trade that maybe is unexpected that can maybe push somebody down as well. That's right now the guessing game. And I think we may have lost Roberto. We did. Appreciate the phone call. His point about, free agency is a bit of a domino effect. If you lose one player, you lose 2. Does that then create more space to maybe retain the 3rd player? It's possible. But remember, you just don't know the competition from the market, because while Wan'Dale Robinson, we talked about, is coming off a career season,
so is Illuminor.
Illuminor is coming off a very solid campaign.
He's going to get paid.
So that's another player that helped his stock. And all it takes, once again, is one team that has issues, voids, and they want to entertain bringing him in. And Illuminor also has been exposed to multiple positions throughout his career, which maybe make him even more attractive, playing guard and tackle. So all of these things are going on across the NFL landscape that the Giants, they have no influence.
No. Now, what they do understand is that they've got Marcus Bowe in waiting.
Yep.
And he just can't wait to get his hands on a starting offensive tackle position in this league. He showed them an awful lot last year as a rookie. And so when you consider the amount of savings that you could get by plugging Bowe in at right tackle compared to the amount of money that Illuminor is going to need to stay, I think you understand why the odds are probably not good.
And the other thing with Bowe is, what does the new coaching staff think of him? Remember, anybody that wasn't here, I'm not saying that he doesn't have upside, but when you're getting new voices in, you can't just assume that the philosophy that was here previously is going to match how they looked at him. Because remember, Harbaugh, whoever he brings in on his staff, they also went through the draft process over the last few years, just as the Giants did. So they scouted all of these players, and we don't know where they had them ranked or what Eric DeCosta thought of them in the Ravens front office. So, that adds something that could change the trajectory of players and Joe Shane's thinking. But once again, it's hard to operate when you don't know the thinking on that front. But it is possible. I'm not saying that the last caller scenario, in the event that they lose 2 free agents, does that give them a little bit more flexibility to go after the 3rd? Though, in fairness, I know he did bring up, he said McFadden. What he was talking about was Micah McFadden. He was referring to the linebacker. I don't know how much money he would command
he knows
on the open market, given the injury.
On a 1-year prove-it deal, and he would like to stay. Now, again, he needs to know who the new DC is and how that impacts his role. But there's no doubt that you're not going to have to break the bank to bring back Micah McFadden on a 1-year deal. Now, one other thing about Bowe, just remember this. He was a 5th rounder, which means 32 teams passed on him 4 times before you got him. So he was not talked about I know that the Giants, my understanding was that the old regime, had him valued as a very early third-day pick, which equates to the maybe third round potentially, third, fourth round, somewhere there. If you consider him late second day, early third day, maybe. I mean, I don't know if anybody else in the league might have even had that kind of grade on him, but everybody passed 4 times. So I suppose he's got to go down as a sleeper, doesn't he? I mean, if you get picked in the 5th round and you have a chance to win a starting job, aren't you a sleeper?
Certainly, depending on what happens later on in his career, he could very well get to that potential. But I thought where actually you were going to go with your point is the fact that if he was passed by multiple teams in multiple rounds, that also may indicate that they didn't necessarily have him very high on their boards.
Right. I don't think the Ravens probably did.
And we don't know how they viewed him. Not to say that that's a negative or a positive. I'll give you another example. I remember last offseason we received a lot of calls from Giants fans who were looking to upgrade the quarterback situation. They were saying, well, why don't they call up the Patriots and trade for Joe Milton, who ultimately went to the Cowboys as the backup to Dak Prescott.
And when he finally got to play, it didn't look so good.
Well, I mean, once again, that's not what I was getting at. The point was, I remember responding to a caller at the time. I said, the Giants, Paul, had an opportunity to draft Joe Milton. And that front office is still here. So what makes you think that all of a sudden they passed on him in the draft and now they want to give up trade assets for him? You got to think at least like that. So that's why I'm bringing up how Harbaugh and the Ravens thought about some of the Giants' draft picks when they could have very well drafted some of these guys.
And then again, you could always remember that Sean O'Hara was never drafted. Cleveland had him as an undrafted rookie free agent, and then he comes to the Giants and becomes an All-Pro. Richie Seibert was part of a Super Bowl team, undrafted rookie free agent. David Deal, third-day pick.
Victor Cruz.
I mean, no, but I'm specifically talking offensive line.
Oh, well, I just thought you could have brought up anybody at this point.
No, now, it goes back a ways because the last few waves haven't done as well. But when you go back a couple of administrations, the Giants actually did very well with unheralded rookie linemen. Or in Sean O'Hara's case, he was a free agent, but, obviously came into the Brown situation without a lot of fanfare, and then the Giants scooped him up.
One last thing on a related note that I want to bring up, and I may have referenced this on a previous show, not to say that it's a guarantee indication, but remember, first of all, Baltimore did not draft in the top 10 very often during Harbaugh's tenure. But the lone time they did, they took a guy by the name of Ronnie Stanley.
Really good player.
And the reason why that's important,
really good player.
Offensive lineman, but the Harbaugh family has the philosophy of prioritizing up front, and that's just an indication
and
of
the power running game.
Yeah. Which it still would surprise me if they took a running back.
No. But the line plays into the power running game.
In conjunction with the offensive line.
Yes,
I got
it
you.
does.
So the point is that philosophy, that thinking could also influence what the Giants want to do at 5 based on what he did when they had that rare occasion to choose a player in the top 10.
And then there are other people who will say, well, the Ravens defense, they always had a tough front 7, but they usually had a really big play guy in the secondary. Whether it was Ed Reed, whether it's Kyle Hamilton.
Marlon Humphrey.
Yeah.
I mean, the list goes on and on.
They have had at least like one All-Pro in the secondary. It's, one honoring type of player, whatever award they got. Sure. They've always seemed to have at least one guy back there over the years. Now, is Dean a blue chipper? Is he going to be a guy who garners awards when he gets into the NFL? I mean, that's the argument that I hear for people who say, well, the Ravens went after Kyle Hamilton high. They were first-round pick.
Yeah.
And Dean is supposed to be that kind of guy. Harbaugh might want him, especially if they're going to play with a big nickel, which is a 3-safety attack.
That versatile skill set on the back end of the secondary.
You could make a case for it.
Yeah, which Kyle Hamilton certainly fits based on what he's done in the early stages of his career. All right, that is going to wrap up Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. Appreciate everybody, as always, for tuning in as we were broadcasting for the Giants Podcast Studio presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. The archive of the show, our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at giants.com/podcast. Edit is brought to you, the show, by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants. Will be up and running again Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern.
Did you read the Rutgers read?
Did I do the Rutgers read?
We need to do that.
I don't know if I got the memo on the Rutgers read. Well, you tell me as I scroll through this document.
Is it gone?
The Rutgers read, you're referring to the Special Olympics?
Yes.
Okay. It is not gone. It is just buried in between 75 other
I just want to
rules.
make sure we get
I
it right.
am glad you told me this. See, on the fly sometimes we give directions to this program, okay? You can tell there's an overwhelming amount of planning. With that being said, Special Olympics, New Jersey's annual Snow Bowl is heading to Rutgers SHI Stadium in 2026. This annual flag football tournament will be on the field of Rutgers SHI Stadium from March 6th through the 8th, 2026. The 6-on-6 tournament will feature competitive, recreational, and co-ed divisions, and all proceeds benefit thousands of Special Olympics New Jersey athletes across the Garden State. You can register your team today at njsnowball.org. That's njsnowball.org. If that is not the best teaser and read of a promotion in the history of Big Blue Kickoff Live, then I don't know what is. Did it get your seal of approval, Paul?
It does because you read it.
Well, that goes without saying. As
There
we
you
continue to pat ourselves on the back and all over the place, that will officially close up shop here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow. Stay warm, stay safe. We'll speak to you on Wednesday right here on BBKL. Have a good one.